I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought at night just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG Podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello, and welcome to Season 30, Episode 16 of the Happy Jacks RPG Podcast. My name is Kimmy.
My name is Kurt.
I'm Nick.
Dear Lord, season 30.
Great. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
All right. And in today's episode, Edward asks what a traditional TTRPG is. Sean asks about designing games with accessibility in mind. And Michael disagrees with us about GMs taking stuff away.
Well, Michael's wrong.
I disagree.
Obviously. So if you'd like to contribute a topic or question to the show, email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. Blurb. All right. That's a callback. All right. Announcements. Okay, I have a very specific announcement this week. Hang in there. So I'm getting sound production lessons from a very good friend, Wes, who's over at 12-Sided Stories. He's teaching me how to actually process audio for our podcasts, which is great because I've learned previously from YouTube videos, many of which are bullshit I have learned since then.
I don't know that they're necessarily bullshit. I think they're more horseshit.
Yeah, okay. So if you listen to our shows in podcast form, you may notice some changes over the next few weeks. There might be a little bit of a learning curve there, but the overall quality should go up. So thank you, Wes, so much for being patient, and thanks for teaching me. I've learned that I've been really fucking up our sound. So we have all this great equipment. The stuff we record is super great, and then I get it and I process it and make it into actual horse shit, which I then release onto our podcast RSS feed. So thank you for
Infinite
hanging in there.
Monkeys streaming infinite podcasts will
Yeah.
eventually end up with
Yeah.
a listenable product.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, just another small little plug. Check out Wes on Plate Mail Games, and I believe his stuff is also up on Battle Bar.
Yes. So he actually is a professional sound person. I don't know the specific title. There's a lot of different titles in the industry with the soundies. But yes, if you want awesome music for your game, soundies is a thing. Stop laughing at me,
Yeah.
Kurt. He makes incredible sound and like ambient music and stuff for your games that you can use. So,
Hey kid, you look like you're going to be great in the soundies.
yeah, the soundies.
and Kimmy, please, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing toward you.
Laughing in my general direction.
Yes.
Okay. But yeah, go check out Wes.
Preposition.
Fantastic. So hang in there. It will get better. It actually doesn't sound terrible right now, except if you're like an audio engineer and you're like, what is this? No. So, yes.
We're
Okay.
sorry, Jake.
It's fine.
It's Chinatown.
Yeah.
Jake is our sound
I
engineer.
figured. But if you got that line, you gotta jump on it.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yes. All right. That's it. That's all the announcements. So,
All right.
Cool.
First email. Anyone want to read this
I'll
one?
take it.
It's a long one.
I'll take it. It's
Okay.
a long one, and I know the guy.
Okay, go Kurt.
All right. To Captain Kimmy and the crew of the Happy Jacks podcast, your continuing mission to explore strange new games, to seek out and inspire new players and new game masters, and to boldly discuss topics that have probably been discussed before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to boldly split infinitives. Greetings and salutations. This is Edward from SoCal, a longtime listener since season 1, and technically first-time writer. Hi, Ed! Your wish came true! I say technically because, while this is my first email, I have been on your show before. A couple of times at Strategicon and a couple of times in the actual studio. To those jackers with the Ren Fair background, yes, it's that Edward, who used to perform at Fair and sometimes hung out with the Reef crew. Other Jackers might remember me as the guy who helped run the Dying Kingdoms LARP for a stretch.
Now here's the thing: he hasn't been in this studio,
No, he-
so I think that we got to take away those bona fides.
I mean,
Oh.
I hadn't been in this studio.
yeah, but you're here now, which means
Oh,
you
yeah,
got a leg up on him.
Yeah.
That's right. The last time I was in this studio, it was over there, and none of this was here.
No.
That was back when we were doing like interviews with people.
Yep.
It was a while ago. While listening to the podcast, usually in my car while driving, I have often found myself pondering what my answers or input on various topics would be. I haven't written in with my thoughts before because they are, for the most part, less discussion starting and more myself mentally pontificating to an imagined audience. However, this time, and in response to your recent request for emails, I actually do have a question/topic for you.
All
And
right.
potentially a tangential question/topic in my own response to the first. This is a meta question. This was inspired by a question Ali Venable asked when she was when she was first on last season. Stork had mentioned traditional games in response to an email, and Ali asked him what is a traditional RPG. Stork gave a quick answer that I honestly don't remember right now, but now I'm posing that question to you, I'm assuming is what he meant here. In your opinions, what elements make a game more traditional versus modern/hippie? Obviously, this is not an either-or situation. All elements of game and system design are on spectra, and we heartily eschew any restrictive binary definitions in this house. In this house? Okay.
This house. This is my house.
A quick pause in case anyone wants to
No,
chime
literally,
in.
it's my house. It's my
I'm
house.
aware. A quick pause in case anyone wants to chime in with a response before presenting mine.
Too late. We've already done so.
Does anyone have a quick and dirty definition of a traditional versus a modern game?
I think it's important to hear like what he says first, and then
Okay.
we can kind of build on it.
All right. In my opinion, the biggest factor that makes games feel traditional versus modern is how much characterization is integrated with the mechanics of the game. Characterization is my fancy actor-sounding word I like using in place of ROLE playing, mainly to avoid me having to spell it. In your traditional D&D style game, it doesn't matter if my character is brutally attacking their foe in a vengeful rage or nimbly dancing around in a duel, hoping to charm those watching. Heck, it doesn't matter if I just say, I attacked the bandit with my sword. The mechanics of the game are unaffected. Roll that d20, add your bonuses, does it beat the AC? Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, you have games like Lighthearted, where the emotional state of my character directly affects which dice I use. Or Great American Witch, where it's the motivation of the character that determines what you're adding to the roll, not the action you take. In the aforementioned Attacking the Bandit, is my character protecting innocence? Then it's mercy. Am I exacting righteous vengeance upon the wicked? I use severity. Modifius's new Dune RPG also determines your target number based on your skill and drive, drive being one of 5 motivations: power, truth, justice, faith, and duty. There are also mechanics in game that encourage characterization without it being directly integrated into the mechanics. The inspiration die for D&D 5e, or otherwise receiving bennies for good role-playing. Alternately, there are optional rules that you choose to take on a mechanical effect to your character. I'm referring to things like White Wolf's merits and flaws, or advantages, disadvantages. Say I've decided my character has a short temper. I could just play them as such, but perhaps I want to impose an actual mechanical disadvantage when my character is trying to remain calm. So I put the short temper, hot-headed, flaw, disadvantage, etc. These still feel more on the traditional side of the tracks than not. And now he side rails into the second topic. So I think this is the point where either we finish the email or we discuss the
Finish
first
the
point.
email, and then we'll
All
talk
right,
about it.
cool. And within my response is another topic. With games that are integrating characterization into their mechanics, which ones do you feel work best so far? I know a lot of you are fans of the PBTA hacks. Are there mechanics characterization blends that haven't worked so well for you? I'm looking at you, FFG Legend of the Five Rings. I remember listening to the actual play on that one and thinking, yes, the strife mechanic is kind of neat, but can't we just make a perception roll without risking losing face? Are there times when maybe you don't want to have to delve deep into your character's motivations and just want to play? I can see old school game developers, after having to come up with mechanics for combat, stealth, magic, and so on, maybe didn't want to create mechanics for the one thing they didn't have to, i.e., how you play your character. But then you also discussed how having restrictions to your character often helps inspire creativity that otherwise wouldn't be there. There's a lot of nuance and opinions that can be touched upon, including your own personal definition of what traditional means. I hope this email spurs a bountiful discussion. From one of your original fans, Edward, Mithrin on the Discord. P.S. Insert classical Star Trek end credits theme. That's the opening thing.
Well, that's tough. See, I watch on Netflix, so I only hear the opening credits because they switched to the new episode.
Absolutely.
Not true. I actually watched the original.
I've seen maybe 3 episodes of the original series, and I know this better than you do. This is weird.
I think both are fine. It's all right.
All right, anyway.
You don't have to actually.
Oh, no, I actually do. It's
No,
a
you
biological
actually do.
imperative.
Yeah, it is true. Very true.
Y'all have met me.
So, okay. So, traditional game.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is one of those things that nobody's ever going to completely agree on. Like, there's never going to be, like, the definition for this. I think it's very different for each person. And I think it depends on what you've played.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still one of those terms, like indie game, that we throw around all the time. Even though nobody has a shared definition of that yet either.
Nope. It's like pornography. You know it when you see it.
Kind of, except some people see it differently.
I mean, I said it as a joke, but it actually isn't. I mean, it wasn't funny. 2, it really does. I mean, it really harps on your comment about, it also depends on what you've played.
Yeah.
Like the first game I ever
Like
played.
pornography. like I'm just kidding. That wasn't a terrible thing. Like that's legit. Some people will look at something and be like, oh, that's very pornographic, and someone will be like,
It's artistic.
dude, that's Tuesday. Like,
Okay, that's okay. So I mean,
I've been doing Tuesdays wrong. That's all I gotta say.
Tuesday's my game day.
well,
Anyway,
but yeah, I mean, it's all linked together and subjective.
The first tabletop RPG I ever played was Vampire the Masquerade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had, of course, heard of D&D. I just had never played it. The first one I was ever offered to play was Robotech.
Oh, wow.
Or MechWarrior, that's what it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, these are those traditional games? They've
Yes.
been around for a very long time, but not as long as D&D.
Right.
Traveler's been around for almost as long as D&D.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, the whole storyteller system has been around for 31 years. So, does that make it traditional?
Does age make it traditional?
I don't know. According to certain people, it does, but we'll steer clear of that topic.
I feel like there's like elements to a game that give a traditional vibe, but again, this is just like my perception of it. Like, generally, if it's like very based on like table combat, that tends to feel very traditional to me. Again, that's very subjective, but like D&D like came basically like from the tabletop wargaming world.
Right.
So I feel like that's kind of the foundation that a lot of games that I think of as traditional are built on. Even though a lot of them can be played with Theater of the Mind, you don't have to have a mat to actually play them. They were designed to be played on a mat. Like Traveler, I've never actually played it on a map, but like they're actually like hexes and stuff if you wanted to actually lay out the mat and be like, this is my space travel, right?
Yeah. No,
I actually don't think it really has to do with that. I think it has to do mainly with the topic that was brought up here, is that traditional almost always means there are rules. You know what? Actually, as I narrow this down in my head, I think that the difference is a categorization between gaming and improv on there. And so a traditional game will have a whole set of rules about what you do, how you make the attack, how you move, how you do whatever, but has no information on what your motivation is or how your character acts, and anything you add on there is extra. But non-traditional games often have a change in how they want to, like, they want you to interact more with your character and less so with the mechanics of how the world works. It's more important to be in touch with how and who your character is, as opposed to in a lot of the traditional games where that all gets left behind. To use Dungeons and Dragons as an example, the big classic spells that everyone knows or used to because they're phasing them out, but those are based off of people who made like dumb jokes and spelled their name backwards or used, well, I'm a male elf, so my character's name is Melf.
Melf.
You know, to
I
do
saw that TikTok video too.
to do all that stuff. So like that
There's
obviously
literally
had
a
a real,
spell with that name.
yeah, Melf Sassadero.
Oh my god.
But all of that, like, to me, that's a hallmark of a more traditional game.
Okay, so then is Traveler traditional?
I would say yes, because building on that, and please tell me where and specifically how I'm wrong. If the mechanics,
More content.
if the mechanics are the focus to the point where you can optimize mechanics, that is a traditional game.
Yeah, but you can optimize mechanics in, say, a
Yeah.
PBTA hack.
How?
By selecting where you're going to put your +2 and what options and what moves you take to optimize what you want to do. Like, oh, my cunning sucks, so I'm going to take this thing that lets me use bravery instead of cunning, and you optimize your interactions that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
My
You,
que-
you have both played far more Powered by the Apocalypse than I have, so I will defer to that.
Yeah. It's generally not as imbalanced, but it can be. My pushback is Traveler specifically has one of the best character creation setups ever, and it adds a ton to your backstory
Yeah.
and to your role playing and your character.
But it doesn't enforce any of that.
That's
it doesn't
true.
like just because we said, and I'm using enforce in a loose manner, because technically the PBTA stuff doesn't enforce the things you said at the beginning to establish relationships between your character, except that the focus on the game, because the mechanics are so simple, it lets you focus on the interaction, whereas Traveler has no reward or punishment for saying, cool, we met on this spaceship one time, and the other person goes, yep, sounds good to me.
Well, you do get some like pluses and stuff like that. It does impact your skills and your abilities slightly.
Right, but the story doesn't.
Right, yeah.
Like, so if it says, oh, I know there's something that's like, you have a connection with another player,
Yeah.
and I look at you and I go, we shared a drink at a bar and got in a bar fight, and you go, yep, sounds good to me, then we never ever have to talk about that again.
Yeah.
And we get the +1.
That's true. Okay. I get that.
Yeah, and similarly, going back to White Wolf, you have, at least in the original, the what are they calling it now? The Onyx Path. You have nature and demeanor, or you have vice and virtue, or you have, whichever it is, but these inform your gameplay, but you also do get a mechanical benefit when you apply that to your gameplay. But it's usually relatively minor.
Yeah.
Does that make those sort of the first non-traditional game?
I'm sure that the people who wrote it would like to think so. And I can't remember his name their names off the top of my head, but I'm sure that they would, because they were very much trying to write something that was not D&D.
Right.
So,
so their intent was to not be traditional. I think at the time they probably succeeded, and now just we have a wider spectrum, a longer lens
yeah.
Right.
to see. For me, I think traditional, like going back to kind of what I was talking about with the map, I think someone in the chat mentioned the word like simulationist.
Yeah. The
Okay.
gamist versus simulationists.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Spectrum.
yeah, I think simulationist seems to be kind of where the original like start of TTRPGs was, and from that we've kind of grown and like branched out, and now there's lots of different options.
Yeah, I've seen the sort of spectrum from simulationist to abstractist. So Shadowrun is incredibly simulationist. That there's specific mechanics for what type of ammo you're using in your whatever.
GURPS is the same.
GURPS is the same, but you can ignore it.
Well, yes, but it's meant to be very
Yeah.
simulationist if you want to be. Traveler has a lot of it's
Yes, very.
space
Yes.
sci-fi made up simulationist.
Yes,
but
But
you
it
know.
is it to go back to a really old argument. It's very crunchy.
Yes.
PBTA, very abstractist.
Mhm.
You know, it's you and many of the hacks that I've seen, many of the skins that I've seen have essentially taken, you know, you have 5 stats, and you know maybe the 5 stats are moxie, chutzpah, a certain je ne sais quoi or
And
whatever,
the cut of your jib.
and the cut of your jib, exactly right. It's like how do I apply that to unlocking this door, right? You could apply any of them theoretically, right? And,
Well, that's fate.
well, yeah.
Fate's like
Fate is the ultimate of that, I think.
Yeah.
But there is one, maybe 2 ways of doing this, which is the traditional way, the traditional design element of traditional games, I suppose.
right.
So I think maybe the hallmark of the more modern a game is, the more hippie style game it is how many different ways are there to skin a cat?
Right. I mean, there's a lot probably.
Well, what can you expand on that? Like, what are fewer ways to skin a cat as opposed to a lot of ways to skin a cat?
Okay, this is a bad metaphor to use,
Okay,
but
I didn't choose the metaphor.
Yeah.
That's on you.
I was choosing a cliche to hang this on, and now
Well,
you want me to keep talking. This is
Well,
weird.
okay. Regardless, I would say, what exactly do you mean on that?
Okay, so if I want to run across the room and stab a guy in D&D,
Mhm.
the dungeon master might ask me to make some kind of an athletics or an acrobatics roll to get across the room and then make my attack, which will almost always be strength based, unless I'm using a finesse weapon, and then I can use a dex based attack.
Do you have to roll to make a move action?
Not usually.
No, it depends on.
Sorry,
Usually, no.
I'm being a bitch. It's fine.
No, it's a legitimate question. It's a legitimate question. And the
You
reason
do
I
have
bring
to
this
keep
up,
accurate time
Yes, you
records,
do.
though.
Or it's meaningless.
it's a legitimate question because I bring up this specific example.
Yeah.
Because it is an example specifically listed in White Wolf 20th Anniversary Edition for how many actions you can take on a turn. If your path is free and clear, no, there's no roll required, right? But if there's a whole bunch of things in your way, other people maybe, then you may need to weave between these obstacles in order to get to your object. And for that, in D&D, it might be an athletics or an acrobatics roll, depending on how you
Sure.
want to do it, whether you're bull rushing or you nimbly, parkouring your way through. In White Wolf, there are specific rules as to how many actions you can take, and you might have a die penalty or a difficulty increase for each additional thing that you're trying to do on your turn.
Okay.
In Powered by the Apocalypse, let's take masks, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've all played it, we all know it. Even me. You're running masks, right?
Okay.
I say I want to run across this crowded room and stab that guy.
Right.
What
Well, that sounds like a prowess roll to me.
a prowess roll. Okay.
By the way, anyone who does actually play a lot of mass, if I had the wrong stat, I apologize. I played it once, and it was also with a Kurt. So while I do have some familiarity,
But it
I
wasn't
don't
this
know
Kurt.
exactly
It
what
wasn't this Kurt.
it was.
It was?
I think
Oh,
I think
never
you'd
mind.
want to directly engage a threat would be the thing for that.
Directly
Right.
engage a threat. Okay. So
Oh.
that's the
Apologies.
the move
Mhm.
that you would take, right? That's the language of. It's been a while since I played PBTA.
Yes.
That's the move you would take, is you would directly engage a threat.
Yeah.
Well, now I can sort of, okay, the way I'm going to do this is and I describe it, and now I can possibly bullshit my way through any of the 5 stats to
Well,
explain
no-
how I'm going to do this.
No, because directly engage a threat is specifically linked with a stat.
Oh, is it?
So
Okay.
the way the PBTA works generally is you have your set of moves, and each move is specifically linked to a stat.
Okay.
So when you're directly engaging a threat, you're going to use a specific stat. When you are comforting and supporting, like continuing with the masks move, you're going to roll that specific stat.
Okay.
There are a couple exceptions. There are some Passions de las Passiones, which I totally say wrong. I apologize. Has some where you can add pluses based on specific conditions.
Okay.
And I totally just stole that for one of the moves in Starscape.
No. It's an homage.
Homage. I'm homaging to it. But for the
Is
most
that legal in this state?
I'm homaging.
homaging.
For those of you listening, we're all voting.
Yeah.
Or some bullshit version.
Yeah. Very bad. But basically, yeah, so the moves are still linked with stats in the way that more traditional
Okay.
things would be. So you would actually, if I was running masks or whatever, I would just say, okay, you run across the thing. Sometimes I'd actually have you roll right then. Okay, roll. And then based on what your outcome was, whether it was a failure, a partial success, or a full success, then it'd say, okay, tell me what happens after that.
Okay.
So then it's like, oh, okay, so I got a partial success. I run across the room, but like, and I'm so upset, and I'm like, you're gonna say you're like a Superman kid type character. I punch him, and I'm so upset that I hit him. I succeed in hitting him, but I also, like, when I land, I slam into the wall behind him. Or as the GM, I can say, okay, you jump. Or the other way you could do that was like, okay, describe to me what you do. You're like, okay, I run across and I hit him. I'm like, okay, great. You rolled an 8, so it's a partial success. So you hit him, but you like drastically overpowered hit him, and you actually slam into the wall behind him, and that makes the room unstable, and the wall's gone now behind him. And so you hit him, good job, you got the point. He took the hit points, but now the room is unstable, and everyone is in more danger.
Okay.
So that type of thing.
So Kurt, if I'm understanding what you were getting here to is that in a more traditional game, there is one way to do a thing. You've got movement, you've got attack, you've got these dice rolls, and you felt that in like for example, a PBTA game, you could con your way into using any of the stats in order to do the same thing, and that's like a difference for you. Even though Kimmy is now.
Yeah, I'm realizing that I might have been wrong.
That's okay. I'm just like, I know I really ummed hard on that. This is just because, like,
if there are certain people watching there.
No. But honestly, like, I've just been in like the deep dive of like rewriting my PBTA design right now. So like I literally like have been looking at PBTA moves like all week for many hours. So I may have pushed a little bit of that like late night trauma onto. I apologize, Kurt.
No, it's okay. No, I would much rather be right than proud. So I'm fine. I'm fine with being told, no, Kurt, you're wrong, and here's why.
Yeah. Now there are exceptions.
Mhm.
Like
I may have picked a too finite an example.
well, PBTA is not necessarily a great example. I think there are probably games out there that do let you kind of like, okay, tell me how you do that, and you can kind of pick different things. I've seen it more with skills in
Okay.
games where like, okay, you roll a stat and then you can add a skill if you can convince me or part of your knowledge base or an add-on to it. But I can't think of one that completely, I mean, other than like Fate, which Fate is completely out
Yeah.
out in left field for me. I have a hard time playing and running Fate because it's just a little too loose
I
for
don't
me.
know that I could try running it. I enjoy playing it.
Yeah.
I've just barely started to grok from a player perspective.
Yeah.
So is another angle to look at this based on the tools that you use in order to play the game?
I mean,
like
there's so
like
many.
I would say that like dice we probably consider to be traditional, but a game that only used a deck of cards as their mechanic, like our Talsorian game stuff, or a game that uses no randomizer at all, like Amber Diceless.
Amber, yeah.
Or even like Quest, which only uses a single D20 and everything is like powered, not
It's like talent trees.
listed on these cards,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like a talent tree.
What was-
Like, are those traditional or are those non-traditional because they use a different mechanic, or is it really like the flavor of how the rules are structured to do a thing?
I think like the randomizer they use is too broad a thing. I don't think you can say something is traditional or not traditional based on that alone, because there are only so many randomizers you can use. I mean, at a tabletop game, like if you're on the internet, then I guess there's a lot more options or things like that. That gets me thinking, like, what other randomizers could you use?
Champions LARP used to use, Tyler King told me about this one.
Stopwatch.
The stopwatch as a
Yeah.
randomizer.
Yeah.
And you compare who got the higher 100th of a second.
Wow.
So it would essentially, you both click and then count to 3 and click. And whoever got the higher 100th of a second won it was essentially, that was the randomizer.
Wow.
And then you would apply modifiers if appropriate.
Interesting.
But I mean, like, the Mind's Eye Theater uses rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah,
For
that's
its randomizer.
I'm just like thinking, I'm like, is that random or like hand-eye coordination with like stopwatches? Like
It's
to the 100th of a second.
To the
probably.
100th of a second, yeah.
yeah. I was wondering about that too. Like, could you just train yourself to be like beep beep?
Well, some people automatically have a little bit faster reaction time.
Yeah.
Right.
Like,
But I think because it's 100th of a second,
Yeah.
and not the
Tenth.
oh, I'm sorry, 10th of a second.
No, they use the 100th of a second. It doesn't go by the 10th of a second. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay, but right. In any case, I was like, if it was at the second level,
Oh,
I could
no,
see that
no.
because that actually does matter when you hit it. But
Yeah.
at the hundredths of a second, that's not. I would be really impressed if someone consistently got higher than anyone else because the second doesn't matter. So if I roll over to another second, but my hundredths of a second is higher.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
And I've seen and played games where the randomizer was you drew beads out of a bag. Beads
Yeah.
were all this felt the same. They're all the same shape, but
Mhm.
they had different colors.
Mm-hmm.
that'd be cool. Like some sort of rune-based game.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to stop like writing games during
know.
the Friday
TM,
podcast.
TM, TM.
Yeah.
Kimmy, Golden Lasso's next product is a Viking-based game with a rune draw randomizer
I feel like
mechanic.
You heard it here first.
yeah. I feel like this is like the third game idea I've gotten in the Friday show.
Yeah.
Oh,
all right.
Well, no-
third?
Yeah. And I'm sort of noodling with one where you use dominoes, face down dominoes,
That's
to
cool.
simulate
Interesting.
dice as that.
I
with
love
the
that.
boneyard.
Yeah, I think we've decided that you cannot specifically.
Yeah, no, it's.
I feel like-
this is my issue actually from the beginning. I was willing to enter into the discussion on an academic standpoint, but realistically, my opinion is these labels don't matter.
I mean, having a very specific definition, I guess, doesn't matter. But it's interesting because it's one of those things that, like, if you say a traditional game, most of us get the same basic
The vibe.
idea. Yeah, it's like when you're like Monet. Almost everybody can be like, oh, okay, I've got a picture.
I get an impression of the idea.
Yeah, I get it.
The root
I
volume.
took art history classes.
Yeah. So most of us can think of like one picture or like a few pictures, and my mom can think of all the pictures because she's, a lady who loves Monet. And it's like you got an idea. You're in the
I got
wheelhouse.
your pointillism.
But you know what I mean. We all kind of get in the same wheelhouse. We all kind of know about where we're at, and like if we start like narrowing down this game, that game, this game, that game, we might
Yeah.
disagree a bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's still like pretty obvious when it's like
So we come back to my initial comment: is it's like pornography? You know it when you see it.
yeah, exactly.
I think that obviously things have changed and things like my personal opinion is that games that we would no longer consider to be alternative but were groundbreaking and alternative at their time were the games that started to incorporate disadvantages.
Yeah.
Like to me that's sort of the first proto alternative game, because you look at games before that like Dungeons and Dragons or the Palladium system where there was no there was no downside involved unless you wanted to play that characteristic.
So
That I can think of.
So specifically, because if you rolled your stats for shit in first edition D&D, there were disadvantages to being required to roll at a -2 dice modifier, but narrative disadvantages that had a mechanical effect. Is that things like the
So
merits and
assuming-
flaws system,
Right. Assuming everyone had, you're right. Rolling randomly does create some disparity, but you're not. Besides the fact that the numbers are bad, you aren't inherently penalized, and there's no roll. It doesn't encourage any change of how you play the character, other than that they're bad at a thing.
okay.
Whereas a game system that allows you to take a flaw or a hindrance or whatever it's called in your particular system does encourage you to, and gives your game master ammunition to be able to make your life more complicated and more difficult. And it does inform your gameplay, I think, a lot more than games where you don't have to have any disadvantage. Like, for example, I can run around in Dungeons and Dragons and we can say that my character has one arm, and there's nothing in the rules that says I can't have the same AC and that I can't hit people with a sword or, even get one chopped off mid-game.
Whereas that was a specific flaw in Vampire, remember,
Right.
of having one arm.
Right.
Like, oh yeah,
Because,
no,
like,
it's a
it
significant one.
reminds you
You
that,
can't
that
do
it
this,
happens.
this, and this. Yeah.
Right.
I think it was a 6-point flaw. Why it wasn't 7, I don't know.
Anyway, I think that what we've all come down to and come around back to is you'll know it when you see it.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that basically,
If you disagree with us, write in an email.
Yes, absolutely.
So do we want to go into the second part of the
I
question?
think that's
probably
probably a good idea.
All right, so
Where Kimmy gets a promotion.
yeah.
right, I get it. Well, no, not the second question in this same email.
Oh.
With games that are integrating characterization into their mechanics, which ones do you feel work best so far? I think
Okay.
we are fans of PBTA hacks. That is a thing that we are.
You are. You are fans of PBTA hacks.
Yes.
I'm
I think if we
very
took a poll
neutral on the
of
subject.
all the Happy Jacks hosts, that I think we would be the appropriate pronoun.
yes. Yeah.
But it's
in
also
general.
we were Savage Worlds for a while,
Yeah, sure.
and like we kind of follow the new hotness. Like I'll admit that we're a little bit like, we like that a little bit.
Yeah. I do appreciate the characterization elements that most of the PBTA games do bring into character creation. But I gotta say, I think Traveler does it best. Honestly.
Traveler does character creation best. But I kind of agree with Nick from what he was saying earlier. Like, it doesn't then tie those things in again. You don't get rewarded for being that character or using
all
that
right.
character bit. Like, I feel like
Okay. All right. I see your
it
point.
has to be in the mechanics ongoing.
Right.
I totally agree with you with character creation. Like, I love Traveler character creation so much. But, there are... PBTA just being kind of the example that's on our mind since we specifically just talked about it. There are ongoing mechanical benefits to continuing with your character, like including like, hey, when you do this, you get an experience point. When you blow up,
Yeah.
whatever
Well,
game it is.
the concept in those games of threads or strings or hooks or whatever they're called in that particular game enforce those decisions that were created in the initial creation of the characters in the group, because they do give you a mechanical benefit, and you're not penalized if you don't use them, but you are encouraged to do so because they give you an advantage in those items. So I think that those reward that style of play.
Yeah.
I will admit I am at a disadvantage here because I have only ever played in one PBTA campaign. I've played in one-shots, but you don't get character growth in one-shots.
Yeah.
And the only PBTA hack that I've ever played a campaign in was Threadbare. And Threadbare, I swear it's so appropriate that it's a toy-based game, because I swear to God it's designed around planned obsolescence. The longer you play that game, the less effective your character becomes.
Interesting. Yeah.
So I have an unfairly biased opinion on that.
Okay.
That said, I have played and run a whole lot of Vampire. And I like the fact that playing up your character's nature, in the case of Vampire, or the newer, in the case of Vampire the Masquerade, or in the more recent versions, the Virtue Vice mechanic, where it's both sides.
And the hunger mechanic.
And the hunger mechanic, too. Those all, I think, really help to inform and enforce character gameplay, and where the ROLE meets the ROLL.
Yeah.
So I haven't actually played V5,
Oh, okay.
but from what I've seen, it does a really good job of it.
There are a lot of things that I like better in 20th Anniversary Edition, but the hunger mechanic is the one thing. I think if I was going to run a vampire campaign, I'd do it in 20th Anniversary Edition and steal the hunger mechanic.
Same.
Yes.
I have, yes, 100%. Yes, I would exactly do the same thing.
Yeah, because
I wouldn't use their special dice.
No.
But I would use hunger dice.
Yeah.
Yes, I would absolutely do that.
Yeah,
I think that's a great addition.
Yeah.
To the mechanics and the setting, both.
Yeah, and the hunger mechanic forces you to kind of
evaluate your decisions.
Well, and also just like it enforces that you are a monster. Yeah. Like a lot of times vampire campaigns end up being, we're superheroes who like the dark, and sometimes are sexy times.
Yeah.
Like
so this is actually one of the reasons why I would love to see, I haven't seen it yet, but I want to see what they do with their other properties.
Mm-hmm.
And I just haven't gotten a chance to look at what they do with Mage, what they do, because Mage has the Mage the Ascension,
mm-hmm.
which was the temporal equivalent to Vampire the Masquerade, had a wonderful. It still had the nature demeanor mechanic,
mm-hmm.
but it also had the paradox mechanic, where your magic could be either coincidental or vulgar, depending on what you were trying to do. Those are the terms.
Yeah.
It's are you casting spells in such a way that a normal person might confuse that for just a normal run-of-the-mill thing, right? Are you casting fireball, but you're doing it through a shotgun?
Mm-hmm.
The example that I always heard was you cast fireball, but you make it be like a gas line exploded.
Yes. That you make it look like that, so it is coincidental.
Right. So
but the more vulgar your magic, the more risk you have of taking on paradox.
Mm-hmm.
And
like if I just shoot lightning bolts out of my hand, that's
right.
not something that can just happen.
And if you do it in front of people who understand what magic is, it's not as vulgar. If you do it in front of sleepers. Right. So and you can only take on so much paradox before reality reasserts itself and rips your avatar into shreds. So
honestly, it's why I always thought it was the most interesting of those types of games, and sadly I just had to turn down an opportunity to play in one because I had another commitment. But
yeah. No, I think that again, that's another one of those where it informs and enforces your play style through mechanics and characterization both,
and the world, like the world itself enforces that as well,
right? Because the entire concept in Mage was that you believe strongly enough in what you're doing so as to rewrite reality over what everybody else believes reality is. Consensus as to what reality is, and you just have to believe harder.
I do think it's interesting, like. And I like that this is linked with what is a traditional game question, because there is definitely, as you look at like traditional games and the march away from that tends to be the addition of mechanics that enforce the role-playing part of, like we were saying that. But it's interesting when you really start like trying to name off games that really have mechanics that not only help you create a character, but then sustain and enforce that character that you've created. And I think it's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
It's easy to get someone to create a cool character, and it's easy to ask questions. Like, you can write a whole game about just asking questions to create a character. But
what would that be like?
Yeah. What? But You know, it's a whole,
TM.
but there's a whole nother thing about like designing a game that then reinforces that on on every, you know, as often
you,
as
Ben.
possible. That was lovely. Thank you.
I'm the only blonde here.
He was holding up a deck in the deck. But anyway, I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I think I'd have to. There's a bunch of games that I haven't played yet. Like I haven't played Blades in the Dark yet. I've read through it. There's a bunch that I owned.
Oh, there's a bunch of games I own that I've never played.
Right, but there's a God. What is
We've
it?
all got that. Nobody's played Numenera, so everybody bought the book. Nobody's
No.
played.
And there's a whole new.
Then that's my answer. Numenera doesn't test. If I'm wrong, write in.
I can't remember there's a whole new kind of family of games that are another kind of offshoot from PBTA that is
PBT,
eh.
Well,
No, it's
hey,
something.
I thought it was the Canadian version of the PBTA.
I was gonna say PBT is what Avatar falls into.
Yeah, it's like belonging beyond believing or something. Believing beyond beyond.
Currently, it's my brand that I trash that while on the show.
Apply cold beer to the burned area.
Oh, thank you. Blake Ryan in chat says belonging outside belonging. There's a whole family of games that are very into that, and those are usually there's a GM-less option at least, or they're mostly GM-less, but they are kind of in the PBTA family. They were inspired by PBTA. I have not gotten to actually play one of those yet. I own a couple of them that I've purchased through the indie game stores and stuff.
They are powered by the apocalypse.
They're like the descendants of Powered by the Apocalypse. Sort of like Blades in the Dark, like that one's
Powered by the renewal.
Yes.
Powered by the gradual rebuilding of civilization. It's a little long.
Yes.
But...
All right. We should probably move on to our next email.
Yeah.
Because we are an hour in.
Oh boy. Okay. Lightning round.
You invited me.
I did. I hear all. Are you going to read this one?
I will, because it's a little weird for you to hear
Okay.
yourself that way, I think.
Okay, yeah.
I'm just going to,
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
this
just going to make that
This
a
is
thing.
the one where Kimmy gets a promotion.
Yeah.
'Cause she's captain.
Cheers, Corporal Kimmy and the
Colonel.
I'm sorry. Colonels. Woo! I ain't even been drinking.
You're the only one who hasn't.
Cheers, Colonel Kimmy and the conscripted court of dice counting commando counselors. It's Sean from just outside of Washington, D.C. Hi, Sean.
Hi.
Better known as RU Jedi on the Discord. Sending more questions for the Happy Jacks email coffers. I'm actually sending you 2 emails because everyone is sending us 2 in this edition. Both with questions about the behind-the-scenes wizardry that is game design, development, and deployment. So this is actually a perfect little segue since we were already starting to talk about that. So, the first of my 3-part... Oh, now it's 3.
Well, it's a 3-part
right.
question in this email, and then he has another email.
Okay. So, my 3-part question in this email focuses on designing for inclusive gaming. First, if any of you have created games and game supplements, we already did the Decima commercial, but we'll do a little reprise.
We don't need to do that every time Decima is mentioned, my friends.
No, we have to do that every time Decima is mentioned.
By demigods.
What steps have you taken to help make your products, especially the digital versions of those products, more widely accessible to gamers with varying types of disabilities? Second, if you outsource any of this work, what type of work was it and who do you use? Third, do you have any lessons learned to share with the captive live show and podcast audience? I recognize that our illustrious and dynamic Happy Jacks crew have a varied array of game design experience from none to expert. So if any of the panel this week have not actually produced a game or game supplements of their own or for someone else, your thoughts are still very much valued if you've seen inclusive gaming design in action or have ideas we should be considering. With much appreciation for the game and the glory. Thank you all for what you've done, do, and continue to do for our community. All the best, Sean from just outside Washington, D.C., and RU Jedi on the Discord. P.S. Drink a person to the toast on your left. Woo! Woo!
Do you smell toast?
Yeah. Something. It's not the alcohol. Drink a toast to the person on your left.
Salute.
Harvey.
Bookshelf, okay.
Harvey's not a person, he's a rabbit.
Rabbits are people.
It's
Puka,
debatable.
puka are people.
It's debatable. It's debatable.
PPS. Does Happy Jacks offer transcripts of the advice show or other live streams? These might be useful for people with hearing impairments. If not, but are interested, let me recommend the website otter.ai. That's otter like the animal, the period or dot, and AI. Not artificial intelligence,
But
perhaps
probably.
artificial intelligence.
Automated transcription. Oh, no.
Inscription? Automated inscription.
Automated inscription. There it is. Transcription.
Which I've used regularly for automated transcription. It's not perfect, although pretty darn good. So, first of all, feels bad, man, because I don't think we do we?
What?
Oh, with the transcripts?
Yeah.
We do not right now. This has been something I've been looking at since I took over because I think it is really important. I have looked at otter.ai and a couple of the other ones. Unfortunately, they're at the point where you get a pretty good transcript, but there's still like a lot of in it, and especially when you're talking about something that has as like specific a vocabulary as tabletop RPGs, they end up with like 70% accuracy, which it's not super great.
Do we have closed captioning on our
The YouTube videos
videos?
Yeah, and I'm
those tend to be closer to 95 to 98%.
Yeah,
accurate.
so those are pretty
even
close.
with jargon.
Yeah, so those are pretty close. I am looking at you, like, if you, there's just a lot of options I'm looking into because I do think it's important to do. We have not done it yet. So I've looked at that. There's like 5 different programs that I'm currently on trial programs for. And every week
we'll have it
find
ready
another
for
one.
season 50.
We'll see. But I do acknowledge that it's something that we need to kind of find a solution
Kurt
for.
Hanlon does not speak for Happy Jacks.
Accurate. It's his first time in the actual news studio. But anyway, so thank you for the recommendation of Otter. I have absolutely looked into that. It's a really cool software program, which I actually will probably use moving forward for like note taking because you can link it up with Zoom and it automatically transcribes stuff in Zoom, which is amazing. But again, like if you're actually providing a transcript for the hearing impaired, you want it to be more accurate than Otter is currently. So, yeah.
So, I'm gonna. Sorry, took a moment for the thoughts to marshal in my head. I have been bad about this in the past. And the past couple of years have really opened my eyes in the ways in which games and other activities are very ableist and are not very inclusive when, to me, that's a hallmark of the gaming community, is that we want everyone to be able to enjoy this hobby and this pastime, and that because of the nature of the game, it should make it easier for people with disabilities in order to be able to participate just as fully as they could. Sorry, I got away from myself here. Essentially, I'm calling myself out for not doing a good job with that, not actually even considering that to be an issue until recently. And I'm glad to see that there's a lot more consideration towards that, including things like, it's different, but I'm also including things like sensitivity in there as well, on there. And I think that both of those are places that I think the community in general can get better at doing. That being said, I don't have a lot of ideas or experience doing anything like that.
I haven't had any experience with doing it in tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
I have had to address this in LARP. We've had I have a couple of very good friends who have LARPed for quite some time, and they some of them have cerebral palsy and other mobility restrictions, and accommodations had to be made and were to the best of the ability of the people who were involved at the time, because we're not accessibility experts. I happen to actually know an accessibility expert, and I know that I'm not him. But you know, it did definitely open my eyes as I started to really look into because in my professional life, dealing with ADA compliance, considering you know, when I worked for an architect and now I work in traffic, where maintaining accessible routes for mobility challenged people is a big part of it.
I think actually it's saying disabled is.
I understand.
Yeah.
I
think it's important because a lot of people in the movement now believe that.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm using the term specifically because while we do have certain accommodations for blind people, we don't really take that into effect for deaf people or
those are
mentally
all
challenged.
those
They're
are
all disabled. I understand.
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm being more specific.
Got it. Okay.
Right. Because most of our issues are for blind and wheelchair.
Right.
And it's very specifically those two things.
Right.
ADA covers a lot more than that.
Absolutely.
I'm saying this is the only thing I have experience with. But yeah, the closest I've gotten with actually designing this kind of thing is trying to figure out how to strap a shield onto a crutch for LARP, and designing more inclusive characters as NPCs in the games I run. I similar to you, I haven't really been I haven't actually designed anything. Well, I haven't designed any supplements like this. I run my own games, but that's about it. So but it is interesting to deal with that on the LARP side of role playing, where at the tabletop people can really just pretend to be whoever they want to be. When you're physically acting it out, reality rears its ugly head in certain aspects. And having to address that, unfortunately, I'm not really coming up with any specific examples in my memory. Sorry, but
well, I think for LARPing specifically, I know the question's more about tabletop, but like making sure that, you know, the area you're at is accessible or as accessible as possible. Making sure you have like facilities, restrooms and things like that are accessible to everyone who can participate. Those things are huge. And that's something that we're trying to improve in the studio right now because my house isn't handicap accessible, unfortunately. So it's one of the things that we have a plan for, that we're kind of saving money for fixing. But, you know, my house was built in the 1930s. So, you know, it's one of those things that while we know when you're planning these things out, especially if you're doing something where there's a LARP and you have a little bit more say about, hey, we're going to do it in this park or this park. Okay, which one has, you know, accessible restrooms? You know, which one has a parking lot that is more accessible? Which one has, you know, actual ADA compliant pathways? Things like that. Renaissance Fair had to work on that hard for a long time because there was a while where we were, you know, I'm not at the Ren Fair anymore, but yeah, Ren Fair was not really ADA compliant. So it had to make some big changes because it started getting some complaints and stuff about it. So,
well, and I've seen reading through some LARP material because I have a friend who's trying to desperately get me involved. They did have things where people who couldn't take like physical blows, there are rules in place for them to still be able to participate by having like a touch rule. So instead of whacking them with your foam sword, you can still engage with them and just, you know, use a touch mechanic as opposed to I'm going to whack you mechanic.
The fortunate thing is the LARP that I was most involved with already had a light touch system, so it wasn't a whack kind of thing. It wasn't, you know, but it, you know, we did not have a call to light. That didn't exist. So, but we did have someone who, you know, who had someone specific who, if she got hit in the head, her retinas could detach at any second. So it was like, oh, okay, let's be real effing careful now about getting anywhere near this person.
Yeah,
But,
and
but on the other hand, everyone had to learn how to fight so everyone could know how to fight safely.
right, and that's a huge part of it is just having, as someone who has students with disabilities in my class, disabled students. It's one of those things that we're trying to switch the language on so that we don't. Person first language has been taught for so long; it's a hard habit to break. I apologize.
My former roommate worked with autistic and brain injured kids, so yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. It's something that you have to. It's not just about providing, things for the people. For the disabled, it is important that you also make sure that everyone around them who's working with them, interacting with them, playing the LARP with them, knows how to access those mechanics. So when you're designing a game, and this is something I've learned the hard way, I thought I knew a lot about this from being a teacher, but since I teach mostly general education students, I've never had a blind student. Like it's just not something that is common in public school classrooms. So there was a lot of things that I had to kind of learn the hard way as I've learned as a game designer. Number one, I've learned play test for a lot longer than you think you need to, because once you get all the mechanics of your game worked out, that's when people start giving you the feedback on the accessibility of your game. And I play tested Decima for almost 3 years. And it wasn't until the very end of it, people started giving me feedback on, hey, this is really hard. You've got these, 3 sets of cards that are all based on colors. I'm colorblind. I can't tell which ones to pick. And I was like, that's a really obvious thing that I didn't think of. So then we put symbols on the back too, so you can still play without knowing what colors they are. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And
or
things
you
like
change the hue or saturation. Instead of changing the hue, you change saturation. So that it's
symbols are even easier though.
Symbols are easier.
Yeah.
Yes,
Symbols are super simple, and it makes it really, really clear.
It also improves accessibility for sighted people.
Exactly.
Or, is that correct?
Yes.
I don't want to be.
That's
yes, that is correct.
If you're in, say, a low light setting and it's hard to tell the difference between purple and red.
Yep. Sun,
Oh,
moon,
here we go.
and
Sun,
star
moon, and star.
cards.
Yeah,
Yep, exactly.
Right.
So, and that was based on like direct feedback. So the first thing you need to do, like play test your game, ask for specific feedback on that, and hire people to give you feedback on it. Personally, I hired his name's Jacob Wood, and he runs the Accessible Gaming Quarterly, which I think it's still being produced. He does a Kickstarter every 4 times a year. All right, look at me.
She's a teacher.
But so and yeah, he went through and looked at my PDFs, made sure, because we designed the Decima PDFs to work well on readers, and he specifically went through on like a couple of them and made sure it read correctly. So that's something that you need to do, because just making a PDF does not mean that it will automatically be read correctly by the digital readers.
Right. We've all seen bad scans.
Yeah, exactly. So
or where they just read through and then they're reading the footer.
Oh yeah.
Or the page number as in the middle of the sentence.
Right. So all of that is stuff that you need to pay professionals for.
Absolutely pay people.
Yeah.
Don't get free labor out of people that you know or have a relationship with. If you're asking for professional work to be done on your products, then you need to pay professionals to do that work.
You will also probably get better product.
A lot of layout things in more traditional books too. One of the things that I'm starting to look at for Starscape is, how a character sheet is laid out.
Yeah.
How much has like tiny little text? What can you replace the text with a symbol?
Yeah.
Like if I do strength, I have a flexing arm, like is that clear that that's strength, so that people with dyslexia or something like that might be able to like go through it more quickly and not constantly have to be rereading things.
There's a board game example, which has a tie-in to role-playing games, because the game is Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
It is some of the best industrial design I have ever seen in a board game. There is so much information that has to be conveyed on these cards, and it is done so elegantly with symbols
Mm-hmm.
and with white on black or black on white text.
Yep.
And with which works regardless of colorblindness
Mm-hmm.
because high contrast. And I mean, even to the point where I mean, there's all of these cards that are needed in so many games that have cards, and it has a molded thing that you keep all the stuff in, right?
Mm-hmm.
A molded plastic thing that you keep all the stuff in, and they actually thought it out to the point where instead of putting the little finger holes so you can reach in and grab the card, they made the bottom of the mold like this.
Oh.
So you push on one end of the deck and the other end pops up and you take the whole deck out.
That's
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like a little teeter-totter thing in the middle.
Yeah. It's rounded, but
yeah.
But
the people
like,
can't see.
oh, you're right. Yeah, it's a sine wave.
Yeah.
It's a sine wave at the bottom of the. Sorry, I forget that some people
We're a
listen.
podcast.
Right. Exactly. Sorry. But yeah. So I mean, this is a very fine example of conveying a whole lot of information using various visual tricks, visual techniques that and also just being like, how do I get the damn cards out of this molded plastic? Oh, push.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Well, and
thing
that's something that makes it better for everyone.
Everyone.
Exactly. Yes.
I've got big fingers because I'm a big guy,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes those holes don't work for me, and it's like,
I
well,
have-
I'm gonna grab a pencil.
I
and
have
pop it out
standard
that
size
way.
fingers, and it's hard for me
Yeah.
to get
Right.
Yeah.
Just the layout of the book, breaking up large sections of text.
Mhm.
A lot of newer games are better at this, like having important information in little like floating boxes
Oh yeah.
and
yeah.
stuff like that.
Sidebars.
Yeah, sidebars, highlighted things.
Sidebars are great.
Yeah, like all that stuff is really, really helpful for people with dyslexia, for people like who just have neurodiversity, because it's hard for us to like just read through huge pages of text and remember any of it.
One quick note about sidebars. Sidebars should stay on one page. Specifically thinking of the Wild Talents book, where they have sidebars that go for 3 pages.
Or GURPS does that too, where
Oh.
they'll start
Where
a
it's like-
sidebar on one page, and it's like
So now,
flip it over to have to read
now
another
you
sidebar.
essentially have 2-column page,
Uh-huh.
but one column doesn't lead into the other. You have to flip the page to get the continuation
Yeah.
of both of them.
Those are
Interesting.
awful.
That
Don't
doesn't
do
bother
that.
me. I've never noticed that.
Oh.
Oh no, that I mean,
That makes sense.
Oh my
Like now
God.
that I think, now that you
Sidebars
brought
should
it
be
to my
one page.
attention, I think I'll probably look and be like, oh, this is the most annoying thing that's ever happened.
Well, and like if you're just trying to read the sidebar, and then like I'm reading the main text and it refers me to the sidebar, so I start reading the sidebar, and then the sidebar is continued on another page, so I have to read that, and then flip back to the first page, continue on the
Find
next
my
paragraph.
place.
that is annoying. Okay. Yeah.
It's no good for anybody.
I think it's because maybe I just don't follow directions well. So when it's
Oh,
like,
well, there you go.
refer to the sidebar here, I'm like, no, I'm a fucking keep directions. Okay, now I'll read the sidebar. But you still have to
Little
flip
baby
back.
Kimmy was like, "Fuck your lines," and lit a cigarette.
Yeah. I'm an asthmatic. Why did I do this?
Asthmatic, I thought you were French.
One thing that I do want to get back to just briefly, we sort of briefly talked about how in a game you can be anyone, anything, whatever. One of the problems and one of the challenges I think has been revealed to abled people, I guess,
Yep.
is people don't necessarily want to be able. That
Absolutely.
isn't their fantasy. They want to participate in a world the way that they are and have that representation.
Yeah.
And I do want to make a shout out to Sean specifically. I know I haven't been a great font of information here, but if you're not already, there is a big overlap between disabled communities and RPG on Twitter. And you can absolutely find people who are doing work, putting out ideas, and trying to make things better. The one that immediately springs to mind is at Mustang Art. And they are making, they're the creator of the Dungeons and Dragons combat wheelchair.
I was wondering. Yeah.
On there, which I've been following and is a fantastic
I
product.
incorporated that into my game for an NPC.
I think it's amazing, and just more things like that can be out there. I know there are lots of other contributors and creators who are on there, but you'll find a very big overlap between those two communities if you look for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
A quick point to those of you who don't have regular contact with any disabled people, but you want to incorporate this kind of thing into your game. No two disabilities are exactly alike.
Well, I think the questions I don't want us to give too off point because we could give tons of advice about incorporating NPCs and stuff like that.
Well, okay.
But I think the question is very specifically about design elements. So I want us. We're already
Okay.
running at almost an hour and a half.
Okay. All right. All right.
I appreciate you, Kurt, and I know you have great insight into that, so you have to come back, and we'll make sure we talk about that another time. But I want us to kind of stay on point on this.
No,
because-
you're right. You're right.
Yeah, because I think it's an important distinction because
Yes.
representation and accessibility,
Two different things. Yes.
while they are very like linked in many ways, that is a difference there.
Mhm.
And I think,
agree.
yeah. And can't believe I hadn't said it yet, but you are a font of information. It's really important to pick good fonts when you're making your TTRPG. like it was one of the things I met. Like I've been thinking all day. I'm like, okay, when we do this email, like I need to mention this. Now, and font size is incredibly important. And there are some fonts out there that claim to be like dyslexic fonts. There's been a lot of study on that. So whether it works or not is still. Some people who have dyslexia think that, yes, they really help. Some people don't. The science is still out on it. In actual scientific tests, it has not been proven that it is actually any easier for people with dyslexia to read.
Yeah.
But if it, there are fonts that are easier for them to read. It is definitely important to look into that and do research into that before you publish your game. There are a myriad of stunning, very intricate, kind of tarot-inspired fonts out there in the world that I decided not to use any of them because it would have made Decima impossible to read for a lot of people.
Yeah.
As cool and like thematic as it would have been, the better choice was to make it accessible so people could actually play it.
Yeah, for your horror game, don't use any of those splatter fonts
No.
or
Yeah.
No.
or horror fonts or whatever.
Yeah, so
and when you're putting anything, any kind of page art,
Mhm.
make sure that your text is still high contrast against whatever is in the background on the page.
Oh yeah.
It was one of my biggest problems with Vampire the Requiem book is that it had black text on a dark red background.
oh, that's
Like,
yeah.
What?
They did not hire an accessibility
They
consultant.
didn't hire an editor.
No.
Because, I mean, I have fairly decent, I wear contacts, but I have relatively decent eyesight. I don't have dyslexia. I'm fairly neurotypical, and I can't read the bloody thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
So I know we're gonna move on to the.
Well, I think we're not.
Oh,
Okay.
We're not. Okay.
Nope, because we are at an hour and almost an hour and a half.
But what about all of our fans who wanted longer content
Longer
like
shows.
the good old days?
Well, I love them, but my daughter got invited to a birthday party in the morning, and I have to go buy a present for a 2-year-old
Okay.
at Target, and
Then-
they close at 10.
Then I just have one last thing I want to say.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't going to bring up the whole issue with what you use in order to convey the information thing because I always thought absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh.
Good night, everyone.
All right. So yeah, we're gonna do a 2-email show. We'll save this one for next week. All right.
I'm more upset that I didn't think of it.
Yep.
Yep, you are totally. Erica and Odd, a specific thing to look for in your font is B's and D's and P's and Q's.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so making sure that there are little like hooks and loop-de-loos, and I know that there's a specific name for them, and I don't know what it is.
Descenders, ascenders, and serifs.
Yeah, those serifs. Serif is the word I was thinking of. Serif fonts are generally a little bit easier and a little
I don't know.
bit
I find those angels just kind of hard to notice when they're in the little positions.
Yeah. All right.
But you have such a cherubic face.
Yes. I will say honestly, my dyslexia comes up most often in P's and B's.
Yeah.
They just basically occupy the exact same space in my brain.
Yeah.
And that, like, I absolutely have to drill down. Probably is the worst word ever.
Probably.
Yep.
All right. That was our show. Thank you so much. I can't get over that you just did that on the phone.
I am such a font geek. I
Yeah.
could go on forever, but I'm not even going to start.
I know.
I'm not even going to start.
I'm just so glad that you were earlier a font of information. It was just like so I was like, that's the thing. That was the most important thing I was going to talk about. This is why I should take notes before the show, but whatever. All right.
That's because I gave you a cue with a little squiggle.
The serif, which thing I just remembered.
On that Descender line.
All right. Thank you for joining us for season 30, episode 16. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent.
Yes.
My name is Kimmy. You can find me at Golden Lasso Girl or anytime you at Happy Jacks. That's me too. So have at. And
Oh, I guess I'm going.
You're
no,
next.
Yes.
Never say eunuch.
Not that. You next.
You
next.
next.
Or
yes,
you
that's fine.
Space Nick.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick. You can see me here also on the occasional the advice show. That's what this thing is called.
Yeah.
And also on Saturdays, I will be participating in the Happy Jacks cast-offs RPG, the Quest RPG that we're playing on Saturday nights.
I forgot to say I'm on the Wednesday night show that is the Hexbreakers, which is a Kids on Bikes RPG, and I forgot. So, all right.
And hi, and I'm Kurt, and I'm not on any of our current actual play streams, and I'm very rarely on this stream, and you can't find me on Twitter because I'm not there. But you can find me. Plug.
Go.
You can find me and the rest of my band, Sportive Tricks, at Hennessy's Grill in Seal Beach on August 20th.
Ooh.
We're going to be playing there again. And I say again because apparently our fans made quite an impression when we were playing there last month, and they want us back. So thank you, all of you who showed up.
An impression on their alcohol supplies?
Oh, very much so. Yes,
That's what
exactly
they
right.
like. They like that.
And on their waitresses' tips. So, which is
Excellent.
good. And the fortunate thing about that is that hopefully now we can get into other Hennessy's locations as well.
Excellent.
Nothing's definite yet, but
Right.
we're.
That's very exciting.
So yeah, August 20th. That's a Saturday. We'll downbeat at 8, playing till 11 in Seal Beach, California.
Awesome. All right, and we're going to leave you with a song from Sportive Tricks tonight. So we're going to be playing Time Flies When You're Having Rum, which is actually written by Kurt. So very
Written
nice.
by me and Jeremy Lamontia. He wrote the music.
Got it. Very good. And you can find them at sportivetricks.com. So thank you all. We will see you next week.
Also at Sportive Tricks on Twitter and Instagram.
Okay. Can we go? Are we done? Okay, now we're done. Okay, goodbye. Goodbye.
And wait.
Wait, no. Okay.
I'm kidding.
God damn it.
I woke up late for work today, had just gone to bed. The bells and drums keep echoing around inside my head. Last night I tied one on, or was it 2 nights ago? It seems I can't remember just how far did I go.
It must have been on Friday night I met the lads downtown. Shots were lined up on the bar, beers were handed round. Tom was there and Tammy, Tyrone and Dominique. It was no special occasion, just the end of the week.
No Jose, no Jaeger, no Jameson's, please. But pour me the Kraken or Sailor Jerry's. Bacardi and Malibu, dark, gold or white. Then pour me in a cab at the end of the night. The sun cracks the window as to slumber I succumb. Time flies when you're having rum. A daiquiri for Dominique, mojitos for Tom. Sammy ordered for herself a refreshing cherry bomb. A hurricane for Tyrone with a splash of peach. And needy and thirsty, I had one of each. No Jose, no Jaeger, no Jameson's, please. But pour me the Kraken or Sailor Jerry's. Bacardi and Malibu, dark, gold or white. Then pour me in a cab at the end of the night. The sun cracks the window as to slumber I succumb. Time flies when you're having rum.
The events of the weekend are mostly a blur. Cause those who stop when bars close are strictly amateur. Remember a zip line reach out to the week that I forgot.
No Jose, no Jaeger, no Jameson's, please. But pour me the Kraken or Sailor Jerry.